Hey everybody, welcome back to the Painter and Poet podcast. My name is Zach Hampson. I'm here with my co-host.
Avalon Breen.
Awesome. So today we're trying out a new setup. I've got my mouse here and I can flick between my camera here or Avalon's camera there and seeing if it cuts down my editing time a bit, see how it goes. But anyways, today on this podcast, we wanted to talk about the art scene and how it sort of changed over time and what it is now and how we've experienced it now and the pros, but mostly the cons, I guess, of each one. But yeah, before that, me and Nav went away for a week. We had a lot of fun. Did you want to tell people about where we went and stuff and what we did?
Well, felt like we went everywhere, really.
Yeah.
Well, mainly we went to Barrie, and then we went to Nara, Kangaroo Valley, Jervis Bay, is it?
Yeah.
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 I don't know if it's Jervis or Jarvis. I'm always like,
Yeah.
phonetically, I'm like, I don't know.
Phonetically, I'm just like Jarvis.
Yeah, that one that has Hyams Beach, the really
Yeah.
iconic
Yes.
white sand beach. We went
Yeah.
there. That was pretty sick.
Yeah, no, that was really good. I liked that a lot. I thought it was cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was really fun. So that's what we did for the last week. That's why this episode's later in the week, where we probably wanted to launch on Mondays. I think was the thing. We want to do Mondays and stuff, and just so that people would have something to look forward to on Mondays mornings, rather than the typical I hate Mondays or some shit like that.
Yeah. I don't feel that way, but,
Yeah.
I'm sure the majority of other people do.
I know. Yeah, well, neither do I. So that's why this podcast could maybe help people out with that, I guess. So, to kick things off, Av, did you want to talk a little bit about what you've seen recently and how you feel about poetry and what maybe start with what poetry means to you and it being a vessel for things in this life and maybe talk about the energies that come along with that and maybe what society thinks of it and treats it now. If you've got some thoughts, maybe that I'm just saying all that, so it's like you got a nice start.
Like super broad, sounded like 20,000 questions.
Yeah, well,
one.
I wanted to help you out with it. I wanted to, give you a nice broad thing that you.
No, I get what you mean. I get what you mean.
Yeah,
I understand, but I don't know. I don't think still really I have too much in depth to say about it, but. It's more so, I think it's just kind of along the same lines as what you say about art and poetry. Just like art being its own, art form and how it should be one of those things that's timeless. And that's why I think when you read poetry, it should be, well, I don't want to say it should be around, certain concepts or whatever, but I feel like the essence of really significant poetry is that it is timeless, just like art. And so if people look back, and so many people nowadays still read John Keats and all these amazingly famous poets, and it's just so many his odes and stuff of love and everything is so amazing. And so I think love is something that's just so timeless, and even though the language has obviously changed, and because language just goes through a metamorphosis over time, it's so different, but you can still just relate and distill the essence that he's getting to, and it just speaks to you on this other level. And I just feel personally that nowadays poetry scene is, like you said, used as a vehicle for just some sort of political message, and kind of that, I guess, people have just really hijacked poetry that way and have the monopoly on it to kind of talk about their own victimhoods, I think, which obviously poetry is a platform where you can just use it essentially to talk about feelings, experiences, the human condition. I think that's what poetry really does try and grasp at, but I feel like it's just gone so unbalanced to this point where, yeah, it's just about the current political climate. So that doesn't really translate to me as something that's, you know, timeless, because our issues, like like decades ahead, hundreds of years ahead, you know, how are people really going to relate
Or
as much to that?
resonate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as much to that. Like, I know obviously in the past, you know, of course there's been so many writers and poets and artists that do comment on, you know, and make political commentary, like 100%.
Yeah, for sure.
Like all the
For
time.
sure.
But I just feel like now the scene is just, it's so saturated in poetry that just feels like that's just what it's all about.
Yeah.
Where it doesn't speak about, you know, and we think about times of like Shakespeare and all the things that he would talk about, you know, in his poems. You think about destiny and fate and,
Everything.
you know, futility and these
Mm.
philosophical, more like philosophical questions that are open-ended questions about our existence that we'll always relate to, you know.
Yeah, it's the never-ending human experience that he sort of encapsulates within his works, you know. So his stories of love and loss and tragedy and
Yeah.
heartbreak and peril and, you know, despair, you know, these things we can all resonate with because either we felt them directly or indirectly or little bits of them at a time and stuff like that. But it's all things that we can resonate with and you know, nod our heads to and really feel when we read his works, at least at some level that we understand. And you know, it's just something that today's poetry, you know, I'm not as much in the poetry scene as Av is, obviously, but from what an outsider looking in and somebody that's, you know, reads, you know, a decent amount of poetry, I guess, for somebody that's not part of the scene, I suppose. But just an outsider's perspective looking in, you know, just looking 50 years back and then just, you know, you don't even have to look that far back. You know, seeing phenomenal works by incredible writers, those of which I'm not familiar with their names, but
Yeah.
but and then comparing, you know, even that recent history to now, and maybe you could talk about what, you know, you see in the poetry gala days. I don't know what they're called. Like they have big poetry shows with guest poets and all that.
Like,
you know,
poetry festival. Like
yeah,
writing
festivals.
They're
Yeah,
more
yeah,
writing
yeah. I
festivals.
forgot about what that word was. Festivals. But maybe if you want to talk about that a little bit, and maybe what you've seen from the writers of today that are, you know, put on these pedestals, I suppose, in the social talking grounds, I guess, or
Yeah.
you know, yeah, something like that.
Well, I don't know if there's like any like specific poetry festivals, but I think, yeah, it's more like writing festivals that inclusive of like poetry and stuff like that. Well, obviously I actually volunteered to be a volunteer at this year's young writers festival, because I wanted to see it firsthand for myself and obviously get out there and be more a part of like the writing and poetry scene. But then as soon as I just saw the lineup, like just the lineup and what people would talk about and stuff, it was just all the same. And to me, it just read as, all right, who's the most oppressed, like kind of thing, and like who can get the biggest trophy for the most oppressed victimhood life. And I just thought, to me, that's just not what poetry's about. Like, I understand, of course, completely, and I've written poetry, you know, about tragic, and I do that a lot because I feel like it is easy for me and becomes natural and organic to be able to channel, I guess, intense past feelings or traumatic or sad or heartbreak. But I feel like people have gone beyond that to an extreme where they're just completely facilitating and romanticizing what it means to be oppressed and to be a victim and to remain in that victim mentality and not go beyond that. I don't think it really ever talks about too much about healing. It's just being in that still that same stage of tragedy, and it's just overly romanticized victimhood, and I just don't believe poetry's like that. So I just opted out of that as soon as I could because I just didn't really want to be a part of that.
Yeah.
It just doesn't resonate with me and what I think art really does.
Yeah. It's become a sort of badge of honor, don't
Mm.
you think, that wearing it's like, if you want to talk about the book you're reading recently, what's it called?
It's by Caroline Myss. So if anyone knows Anatomy of the Spirit, which is like this super like really big bestseller book, Caroline Myss is like amazing. I love that book. It's a book she wrote after this that I just started reading, and I'm pretty sure the title's why people don't heal and how they can heal, and it just talks about, and it's so great. I could go into talking about that whole book, but it's really just it just opened my eyes to, and just because she's like a medical intuitive, so she's a person that has these natural gifts and abilities of being able to look at someone and see where the illness, has manifested in their body that does relate to like say an emotional tie, or like it's really hard to like describe and get into. But anyway, the book that she talks about, and she talks about things and how we've in the past, maybe like a few decades ago in society, people wouldn't really be that expressive about, their wounds or their scars or things going on in their lives. Things would be considered really intimate information, so you'd probably only share maybe with like your partner or really, really close people. You wouldn't just go around talking about, your open wounds or your traumatic experiences. But now, since the new age kind of has come along and it's just exploded, like that scene, and it's all about talking and, expressing yourself and releasing and like letting go of all your wounds and being able to be vulnerable in public. And she just talks about how people have taken that to an extreme where people want to wear their wounds and they want to keep them, and they're not actually getting to a point of healing. They're just using it as a way to bond with other people. And so it's just it's a shortcut to intimacy, really. Like, some people bond over their scars of like childhood and their similar traumatic experiences and everything like that. And she says how people, we use our wounds as a way of not really moving forward, because if we can use our past of like saying, oh, well, I've been abused, or my dad was alcoholic, so that's why I'm not able to accomplish all these things. It gives you this low expectation on accomplishing things in life, and it kind of negates that personal responsibility to move beyond your wounds, which is what they're there for, and that's what healing is all about. But people stay in that kind of position of being wounded because it gives them sympathy, because they can bond with other people. It's just turned and deformed into something that it wasn't meant to be at all. And I feel like has definitely probably even translated into the poetry scene.
100%. The pendulum is definitely swung in the other direction now. It's really, gone from not talking about it at all and being something that,
just the other end of the spectrum. This hasn't been like a balanced medium. People should just be where they can, should be free to express their vulnerabilities and their tragedies and everything they've gone through, but then realizing being supported in being healed, not just being a forever wounded, soul, which a lot of people just attach to, and they are letting their wounds define their life, and they're letting their victimhood define who they are, rather than actually moving on from that.
So to bring it back into poetry from all these things, it's poetry and not just poetry, but I suppose the creative arts in general. Music, I don't don't think music so much. I mean, music has little touches of it, but music's a bit different. I feel.
I can't really speak.
Yeah,
on,
I can't really
I
speak
can't
on
really
music.
speak on music.
But from
so.
what I've seen of music, it hasn't really been affected too much. As definitely not as much as what poetry and painting and the creative arts have been. And I think that's because, poetry and painting are a little bit more accessible than I suppose putting together a song. You got to be able to be musically inclined. Otherwise, we can all tell when music's really bad, but we've been tricked in the poetry and the painting side of things to think that we don't know when something's bad, which in fact isn't the case. You don't need to be a professional painter like myself to be able to, have a taste in paintings, or you don't need to be a professional writer like Avalon here, or to have, a taste in poetry or the written word, and I think these mediums have been tricked the most, at least the public has been tricked the most on these mediums, that you don't know what is good and you don't know what is bad. In fact, if you're not trained or have any knowledge, they like to huff themselves up into thinking that they know more than the other person, then you don't know what is good and what's bad. And that's kind of how they get you, and they create this sort of like little circle sanctums of people that understand the arts more than what other people do, and that in itself becomes that sort of ground of people finding common ground on being better than other people, I suppose. And then also opens up the ground to people sharing their hurts and their pain and stuff like that through the art, and becomes this weird accepted sort of circle where the general public looking in doesn't know really what to make of it, doesn't really know what's going on, and then they're just told that they just don't understand it. And so yeah, it's kind of this crazy world we're living in at the moment, where the pendulum swung too far the other way, and nobody really knows where to sort of sit with that sort of stuff, except for the people that benefit from it, I suppose. You know what I mean? Yeah. So going from there, did you want to talk about maybe stuff to do with, I don't know.
With what? I don't know. Well, I just think it's pretty obvious. I think anyone could look at, like, especially in, poetry and art, look at the caliber of artists in the past, and you can, people like deem it, of course, like a golden age, but look at exactly like Michelangelo and the things that he created with his own hands, and you look at some amazing poets, and I know everyone, it's so cliche and everyone overuses Shakespeare, so I don't want to keep using Shakespeare, but like poets like exactly like Ezra Pound or friggin' like like I said, like John Keats and all these amazing, like, well, I personally love Edgar Allan Poe because like I just think he's amazing. But and like read like their works and just be like, oh my god, this is insane. Like I just feel it just blows my mind reading anything, because I'm like, how could you make it? Like I just can't. I read The Raven all the time, and I'm like, the rhyming scheme, everything, it's insane. Like in the content, and then you look at some poetry nowadays, and there's like I just feel like you can just naturally, instinctively, as a human being, notice the significant.
The craftsmanship is gone.
Yeah, the craftsmanship is just absolutely like insane, the level of difference, and you can tell that with art. Exactly. Look at Michelangelo, look at all the amazing artists, and look at look at contemporary artists go to a contemporary art, museum
Yeah.
and look at that, and they'll say, oh, this is extremely, abstract art or whatever,
Yeah.
and they'll try and exactly trick you and say all these, techniques and
Yeah.
what about that picture that we saw the other day? And
Oh,
oh
God,
my God,
fuck.
tell them about that. How
What did
crazy
it
this was.
What did it say again? I can't
There was-
remember. What
there
did
was
it say?
A painting by this painter that literally just said in black writing, "Did you come yet?" And the caption
yeah.
of it, the gallery trying to sell it,
God.
was insane. It was saying the most ridiculous stuff I've ever heard in my life.
They were pumping that. My God, I couldn't believe it. It was this big, like, 8-foot by 5-foot stretched canvas with just, I don't know, black acrylic paint used to sort of write on it in just big, spaced out letters of exactly, "Did you come yet?" And I was like, what the fuck is this? And then I read the caption of the art gallery that's promoting it, and they were just like saying all this fantastic stuff about how he challenges the perspective of the world and all these things. I can't remember.
Yeah, and he's blurring like colloquialism and realism, and it just was unbelievable the way they were trying to sell it.
Oh yeah, no, it was crazy. It was crazy. It was like a full paragraph of like a good like 100 words or something like that, of just huffing this piece up and huffing this artist up. And I was like, oh my fucking God. And then, but what I love about the internet and the amazing sort of world that we live in is that people can just comment on it and speak their mind. Doesn't matter. And there's people going like, oh yeah, this is fucking retarded.
Yeah, the amount of comments that we saw, like, what the fuck? Like, this is pathetic. Are you kidding me? Like,
oh yeah,
like, what the hell?
Yeah. People know what's up, and so the balance there is starting to shift a little bit. But I want to go back to about how, because I don't know about poetry too much, but I do know a great amount about the art scene and painting scene, artists of that nature. So to talk about the contemporary world that we live in, that there was an obvious change over time that led us to where we are now. And it wasn't always a mindless, stupid, huffed up piece like we see nowadays. It used to be a really well thought out work, a series of works. So I'll give you an example. So, when Monet and those impressionists came into fruition and started showing at the art shows in Paris and stuff like that. Well, didn't get to show at the art shows. They got rejected all the time. Had to start their own art shows. People saw that as ridiculous and saw that as retarded. But what they saw was that they were able to see the world in a different way, and were able to capture the way that the light fell, because they all knew how to paint. They all had the craftsmanship, and they were all masters over the medium that they were using, and they all knew how to express the world with the paint and brush. And so they knew what they were doing, but what they also saw was the way that light falls on things, and the way that they could translate the world in such a way that it brings this newfound way of seeing everything. And so Impressionism was sort of born through that idea. And scroll further along, we start to get people that paint a little bit more loosely, like Savoya or Sargent, and they start to get this new way of thinking of, well, why would I paint something in 10 strokes if I can work out a way to paint it in 1 stroke? And the mastery over the movement of the paint and their brush handling came to the forefront there in the way that they translated the world. And you see that these guys, they could be meticulous, not saying that meticulousness and rendering is what art's all about. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that their ideas were well thought out, and they knew and they had mastery over their crafts. And they knew how to manipulate the medium that they were using. And so their mastery was still there, but they chose to, through their mastery, deconstruct it and then reconstruct it in a way that they could, that they brought forth into the world. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't, a random splatter of paint. Like, they had mastery over their medium. And so fast forward some more, and we come to Picasso. And Picasso, people don't often know this about Picasso, but when he was around 13 years old and a younger man, he was able to, paint very high Renaissance type of portraiture. And, he definitely had mastery over his medium and his skill and the way that he could manipulate paints and brushes. He had a lot of mastery over that. And it was as he progressed through that, is that he started to see the world differently and thought, if I can, if I see somebody posed like this, why is it that, I can't paint their other ear or their eye that I can't see, make it seeable here as well, so his ideas sort of stem from that, but he did have mastery over his craft. And so his ideas and cubism and all those crazy paintings that you see him do, they're founded in a rich knowledge of his craft, and they aren't random, and they aren't just flicks of paint and huffed up by some galleries. He's a real master that's really thought about his craft and really thought about the painting and the brushes and the canvas and the composition and the colors and everything. He's really thought about it, and he's put a lot of energy in it because he knows his craft and he's a master in it. And now I guess fast forward to I don't know, artists of today, I suppose, and you kind of just see this whole, like, the craftsmanship is gone, and the mastery over the craft has been forgotten, and what we have is a caliber of artists that have no mastery over the craft and have no mastery over the medium, and only have a conceptual sort of I guess aspect to their art making. It's just high conceptual, and then the craftsmanship is gone, because they're like, oh well, what is art? It could be anything. I'll put a toilet in the middle of the gallery and call that art, which has happened and continues to happen, stuff like of that nature, like, and then like the paintings that we saw the other day on Instagram, and people going, this is ridiculous. So it's very interesting, the progression that the art world has seen, and it's a very linear one. That's it's very ridiculous. It's crazy to see how much the art scene has changed, and I think that's come into form with the idea that you don't need to be a master of the craft. You just need to know how to sell works and stuff like that, and that's where galleries have come into it and created works for people that they can jack up the prices for, and because they're able to sell it as a thing that only select few understand, and so it gives this sort of like wow factor to people that buy it, and they can sort of flex that to their friends and saying like, I bought this $1 million piece of artwork, and people will look at them and go, what the fuck is it? That looks retarded. And he's like, you just don't understand what it is. So they get to sort of flex that as well. So the galleries, they know what they're doing. They're creating. It's just commerce. It's just hype, really, and the everyday person, just sort of is left behind by that. We could kind of like look at art and go, what the fuck is going on? So I guess this leads us into another thing that we wanted to talk about how the arts aren't really valued anymore, and how the status of the artist isn't valued at all anymore. So did you want to talk about that a little bit? Maybe talk about how poets and writing isn't seen as valuable anymore.
Yeah. Well, like you said, exactly the same as like in the art scene, probably just the degradation of the caliber and the standard of work that's being put out there. People are just looking at it, and if people look at poetry, or if they look at art and they think, well, I can do that myself. Exactly. They're thinking in their head, well, why would I pay millions of dollars? Why would I invest my money? What's so special about that? And I think, and I think it's hard at the same time, because I do believe like everyone is creative, but I feel like creativity
of course.
is just like such a broad, kind of thing. But then when I guess you distinguish between people who creatively are so, like you said, masters at their craft and have put in so much time and effort to learn all the skills, all the tools, really sharpen their swords like every day, like you do as well. Even I don't do that, so I'm definitely not going to sit here and say I'm a master at my craft at all. I'm still very, very novice. But I've just always had an inkling for writing, so I just like that. So I guess if there's just anything I thought that I was potentially naturally creative at, I was thinking maybe it's just words.
Yeah, but don't sell yourself short. The works that Avalon makes is very, very incredible.
Thank you.
I really love and admire
Thank you.
your writing.
Well,
and I'm looking forward to the book you're working on.
Yeah. Well, it's like soon everyone can judge for themselves anyway when I release my book pretty soon. Or my first debut book that's in the works. Basically finished that. So
sorry to interject, but I just
no,
had to say that.
No,
Go on.
That's fine. What were we saying again? Yeah, so writing, like you said, the arts isn't really valued equally as a profession. If you say to someone like, oh, I want to be a writer, I'm going to be a writer, or Zach, if he says, oh, I'm going to be an artist, or even that translates really into music as well. Most people that say, oh, I want to be a musician, a lot of things of that creative nature, people just kind of scoff and laugh at you, and they're like, oh, is that like a real profession? Is that even feasible? Like,
how to make money?
Yeah, exactly. Everyone just instantly goes, how do you make money? And I think there should be like a distinction between, exactly, you can engage in art and music and everything, and that can just be your hobby, and it can be your passion as well. But a lot of people, I think, do get confused that your passion has to be what makes you money. But I feel like that you need to distinguish, I guess, for yourself where that kind of sits. I feel like that varies for everyone, and there's a lot of people out there that just engage in art because of it's healing, it is therapeutic, it is just an actual hobby, and they don't need to get paid for it. There's a lot of people out there that don't need that to be their career or their financing. It's different for everyone. So I feel like there should be a distinguishing thing between that. But the people who do, really work on their craft and work on it to the point where they do, financially and want to professionally be recognized, that caliber is even dropped incredibly, like you said, just because the standard, it's just like, oh well, people think, oh, I could write this story, or I've read books. Like, I'm not that much of a reader, and I'm not that much of an avid reader in kind of fiction or nowadays kind of writers. I don't really read that much, but I have read some books where literally they'll be like bestsellers, or people just like, oh my god, this is amazing. And I just think, and it's not just me, I've had friends, that are just like, wow, I feel like a 5-year-old could write this, like this story, it's not compelling. It's just everything's just so hyped up. It's just overly hyped up.
Yeah, there needs to, if I had a dollar for every time somebody asks me what I did, and I say, I paint portraiture, I do landscapes and stuff like that, and people go, oh, my auntie does that. Or, oh, my grandmother does it. I'd be a very rich man if I had a dollar for every time I heard that.
That's why I said there needs to be a distinction between people who do, like, even I was talking to like a friend last night, and he said, he like knew someone that, and he said, oh, like she's a painter, and then he said, oh, I'll scratch that. She's not really a painter, but she can paint. Like, I wouldn't say she's an artist, but she can do, like abstract art and stuff. So he even recognized himself, and he's not even into really arts or creativity at all, but he picked up on the difference between someone who paints and someone who is a painter, like that distinction.
Yeah.
He could even make, I think, for yourself.
Yeah, Jeremy Mann, I've heard him talk about this before. If you don't know Jeremy Mann, I don't know what you're doing with your life. You need to go look him up right now. Just Google Jeremy Mann, man with 2 N's. He's a phenomenal artist in every respect. And he talked about this exact thing on one podcast I was listening to him being interviewed on. And he just talked about, he's like, people got to realize that there's not everybody's an artist. You might paint and you might push around some paint. You might make artworks, so to speak, but you're not an artist. And that needs to be a thing that, we all sort of understand a bit more clearly, because if you look around nowadays, with the blessing that is the internet, we can just, it seems like everybody's an artist and everybody's, making artworks and all that shit. But it's what sort of, there's a real big divide between, somebody that enjoys the process that is painting and enjoys the process that is making artworks. And then there are people that are real masters in this craft and the real artists in this craft. And this is a huge divide. And people seem to be really blind and blur the lines between those things. But when you really get down to it, an artist is able to, he's master over his entire medium. He's a master over his paints, his brushes, his chisel, the rock that he's sculpting from, or whatever, and is able to bring forth a story, a narrative, bring forth, a concept, conceptually construct something into reality that is, that just blows us away, really, in every respect, and then also, you do know if you've really got that calling to be about painting more so than a hobby, because like I've talked about before, when this is something that you're not, it's not just you're passionate about it, but it's something that you couldn't breathe without it, and that's part of the divide between people that just enjoy painting, and then people that are serious about it and want to become masters in their craft and want to become artists and be able to use this medium to tell these and construct these masterful worlds and stuff like that. But yeah, there needs to be a sort of clarification between those things, and it's all well and good to enjoy the artworks and enjoy the fun that is painting, but you got to have some self-awareness that, really do some work within yourself, self-awareness, look in and think about, is this something that I just enjoy, or is this something that I really couldn't live without? Is this something that when I'm not doing, am I on fire to get in and do it again? And if you don't have that, then I recommend that you just keep it as a hobby and you just enjoy it. Don't fool yourself into thinking that you want to be an artist when really, if you don't have that passion, you're just going to end up in a world of pain, really, like pushing against a brick wall, because when the chips are down and you're not, I guess, you're not making money, or you're just, not able to create the work that you want to create, and you don't have that fire within you that's like, oh, well, I'll just, I don't care. I'm just excited to paint, push, and, make great works of artwork, and, really, no matter what circumstance you're in, you're passionate about it. If you don't have that passion, then, it's probably not for you. And that divide's definitely there. But yeah, did you have anything to add on to that or say about that? I'm sure you do.
No, I don't really think so. Like I said, you're a lot more well-informed on your scene, and I feel like this applies more so to art anyway. So
Mm.
I think you basically covered everything. I can't think of anything that I'd add to that.
Yeah, yeah. But maybe you could talk a bit about you know, this because outside of looking in again, seeing these poetry books getting released that are just got like little one-liners, and they call it like a poetry book, and it's really just like I walked the dog today, and then you're like, what the fuck was
I know
that?
it's hard nowadays to look at the distinction between, well, exactly what really is poetry. I'm sure a lot of people read stuff like that and they're just like, that's a sentence, or you know,
Yeah.
where like that's not like poetry. And it's like it's hard to say, because I at the same time I actually enjoy a lot of like simplistic musings. I even write that way, you know, myself. I actually do think, you know, simplicity like sometimes, but of course the content I feel like behind it is what's the driving force, and that has to be essential. If you're just talking about shit, like how is it even remotely poetic at all? Where's the distinction between normal language and poetry? Like poetry is supposed to be taking an everyday thing, which is language, and doing all these, you know, unique, different, exciting things. Otherwise it wouldn't be called poetry. There'd be no difference
Yeah.
between our language. And so like at the same time, that's sort of it's hard, because with, you know, poetry and art, there are, you know, no matter what I guess level or caliber the art and poetry is, people still have their own subjective tastes. So
Of
people will
course.
just like, even if it's an amazing artwork, they'll just be, oh, I either like this or I don't. Like you as a person have natural instinctive preferences. So sometimes like that comes into play, and I feel like why a lot of works and self-publishing things, or you know, people get all these works published and become like bestsellers, and they could just be filled with like they could just be 200 pages of like one sentence, and you know, people will just buy all these books, and I think it's because people just like it, you know, and you can't really do anything about that.
Of course.
But I think what poetry does is that a lot of nowadays, you know, self-proclaimed like poets draw on again that woundology, which is what Caroline Myss has defined it and coined the term woundology. And if you want to learn like more about it, she goes so in depth with all these like amazing actual real life examples of it. And so she talks more about that. But I feel like what a lot of poets or writers nowadays have just really capitalized on people's want, and that overall romanticization of like being a victim and being oppressed, and you know, being that way. So they write things because they know people will like it. I feel like a lot of poets are just writing things they know people are going to like, and they know people they know that they'll buy. So you find, I think, a lot of works similar to that, you know, nowadays. They just talk about similar things, and they're just one sentences, and it's just like 300 pages of that. And they've just, those people are aware, and they've capitalized, and they know that people want to read that, so they can write that, and that's easy. Anyone can anyone can realize what people like, and they can cater or tailor whatever it is to do that. That's easy. But people who actually write things that, you know, or make things for themselves without, you know, letting other people's, whether or not it's people going to like it, whether or not, you know, it's going to be sold, I think like that authenticity really comes in there. And just a lot of poetry, I just think, lacks authenticity. I just feel like they're not really writing it for themselves, or what even they really want to write, you know. Like I write stuff, and I think, and it's even happened to me because of how different I feel like the way or the things that I talk about or I write in poetry. I'm like, is anyone even going to read this? Would anyone even like this? Like, I'm not talking about, I don't know, being a massive, I don't know, whatever, like Victor or some shit. Like, I don't know. Like, I just feel like, I'm like, oh, does anyone like, you know, the words that I use, the language that I use? Because I try to actually avoid as much as I can modern day, I guess, words or
Mm.
language or things like that.
These words that sort of have
But I guess even modern day kind of
modern.
things, like I don't really talk about, like something that's symbolic of, our era. I'm not going to use in my poems
Yeah.
the iPhone. Like I don't, but some people do,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's different. They just do different poetry, and everyone's different
Yeah,
writers.
of course.
But I just feel like I don't like to, use that in my poetry or anything that I write.
Yeah.
I like it to be, you don't really know kind of what era it's coming from.
Yeah.
So that's why the words and the language, I guess, is more like universal
Timeless.
in that sense.
It's
Yeah,
timeless.
and timeless. That's what I try to do, and it actually does come naturally easier to me.
Mm.
So I sometimes I write and I always think, oh my god, is anyone gonna like it? Is anyone? Will it resonate with anyone? But then I just remember, like, I don't want to be like everyone else and just write stuff for other people because it sells. I don't want to, capitalize on other people that way as well, and kind of I just feel like it's just like exploiting them really, but in this more insidious way because they don't even realize.
Yeah, that authenticity is a big one. I think that the art world has that authenticity is really stripped away from the art world, in the sense of the creative arts, or I don't know what the difference is, like the painters of today, I guess is what I'd say. The authenticity is gone, and the monetary is in replace of that. So what I mean is, I went to the National Art School in Sydney, and it's a great school, really great teachers, and really great facility, but it's played very, very much into the gallery hands. And in Australia, which it's Australia's very different, has a very, very different art scene to the rest of the world. As what I mean by that is the world has a very multifaceted art scene, and there's all these different, there's in America they got Western paintings, and that's a big thing there, and then they've got portrait paintings, there's a big thing there, and there's still life painting, big thing there, plein air paintings, big thing there, contemporary, big thing there too. So there's all these different levels and different facets of art that are really big, and Europe is the same. Here in Australia, we had Warhol, and we've never been different. We had him, and then the Australia art scene was just that was it, and it still is just contemporary modernism sort of shit, and conceptual stuff, and that's it. That's all we really have here in Australia. And going back to Naz, and going back to what that's been about, and seeing that cultivates there, is they really push for you to paint or draw in a way that the galleries want you to draw and paint in that way. And it's because the galleries sort of play into this bubble where you make artwork for them, and they make art. They sell artwork to a particular type of people, and the scene is all about who understands art more than the other person, and it's just like, oh, I know more than you, and I can understand this work more than you, and it seems like this like peacocking sort of weird circle that the art scene is here in Australia, and Naz in itself really, and a lot of the art schools in Australia, there's quite a few really good ones too, but they really take the authenticity out of it and really push you to make works that sell through galleries and sell to this particular type of scene, which is really the only scene here in Australia. There's a little bit of other scenes, but they're definitely nothing compared to Europe or America. And so that authenticity is pretty much gone from whatever sort of art used to be. But yeah, do you have anything to add to that or say about that? Or?
Not that I can think of. I'm pretty sure you sucked me dry of everything I can think of and conjure up.
Yeah, but yeah, it's a funny scene that we sort of live in nowadays, don't you think? With the internet,
Mm.
how there's no gatekeepers anymore, because traditionally gallery owners would be the gatekeepers, and then their say is their say about what sells and what doesn't, and what people should buy and what people shouldn't, and what works they want to hang up and what works they don't. And now we live in a world where the internet sort of just frees everybody of that, and the common man, the common people can just see artwork and be like, I don't actually like that. I have a voice too. I have an opinion too. I don't really like what you're putting out there. I'm gonna like what I like. But they're tricky, so they sort of tell you that you don't understand it, or stuff like that, or they promote writers that that might not be skilled in any such way, but still get to the headlines of festivals and stuff like that for God knows what reason.
Mm.
But yeah, it's this world we sort of live in. Hey.
Yes. Yeah, I don't have anything, like I said, to add, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Seems like you do, though. You keep going, so.
No, I don't know.
I said you'd be the one that would say more.
We could actually go back to
It's going to be a long podcast episode.
No, it's good. No, it's good.
Yeah.
I like long podcasts. So
Yeah,
that's what I want.
Yeah, clearly.
I'd love to go back to to the, what would you say, the hierarchy of the artist, of the creative,
Yeah.
and where they sit in society, I suppose.
Yep.
Because going back to what you were saying about how people go, oh, why? When you really gonna be a writer? What are you doing there?
Yeah.
Are you gonna make some money there, or probably not? What's going on? Why are you doing that?
Yeah.
It's this weird time we sort of live in where and it's very understandable too, with the caliber of artists that are promoted and people see and shoved in their face. They're like, yeah, these people aren't worth shit, because they're seeing the artworks and they're seeing the level of writing, like your friend said about the books they've seen around. They're like, this is shit.
Yeah, exactly.
So
and these aren't even people that exactly, just normal people that have just gone to school and they just like to read books. They don't have any amazing level of education, or have majored in like English and a Bachelor of Arts degree or anything like that, but they can easily discern for themselves if exactly when you're reading something, if it flows, if the language is right, if
they can
if
tell if
it's
something's
off,
bullshit.
like just intuitively as a human being, you're like,
it's authenticity again.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you're someone who is an avid reader though and has read a lot of fiction books, and you read good writing, and you'll read, which is mostly olden like writers, and past books and stuff, and then you'll read stuff nowadays what everyone's kind of talking about, and you're like, oh, this is what like this is shit.
No, it's definitely a crazy time that we live in. The so going back to that hierarchy of artists, and I'm not too sure about the writing side, but I do know about the art side. So originally the artist was looked at, like the painter was looked at much the same as as a mason, as somebody that chopped down trees, as somebody that laid bricks. It was very much seen as just a manual labor type of work, blue collared, I suppose, in a sense. And then throughout the sort of, I suppose, 17th century, 18th century, the level of the artist was risen from manual labor to a more philosophical, a more intellectual type of being, type of work, I suppose, type of human being. It was very much more respected and admired and put on a pedestal, and that kept rising, and people kept having that admiration and respect for artists for quite a long time. And it's only recently that we've seen, because everybody's being shoved in their face of art, that they can tell is inauthentic and is really shitty, that the place of the artist is dropped below blue collared work, below manual labor, and is just seen as a complete waste of time and just a complete waste of society's resources, really. And people sort of really look down upon you for doing such a thing, go, haha, what do you really do, sort of thing. And I don't really blame people for that, because the caliber of artists that they see every day and see is promoted is that sort of crap. And if you see that all the time and you don't really follow the art worlds, and you just see that that's what's held to a high esteem, and you're seeing these, a black dot on a big canvas selling for hundreds of millions of dollars, you're like, this is just stupid, and I can tell it's not authentic. And so everybody, of course, is gonna be like that. But thankfully, from the internet and the world that we live in now, with opportunities and this resurgence of people that are really honing their skills, honing their crafts, and stuff like that, people sort of get together and start to make spaces where people can come together. Did you want to talk about a space that your family's putting together for the arts and for the creatives on the coast?
Yes. Okay. So coming very soon, isn't open yet, but my family, well, my dad mostly, because he's also an artist. For those who don't know,
Fantastic
kind of paints
artist.
more like, I don't know how you describe.
He's very expression driven, very surreal.
I'd say that.
Yeah. Impressionistic type of work, but his artworks are really amazing. I really love his work. I think his works are fantastic. I think he's a very skilled artist.
Thank you. But so we've all come together, and our family is opening up a gallery space in Long Jetty. But not only will it be a space that is a gallery that's obviously designed for local artists, local creatives like photographers, where they can display and showcase their work, but also a space that will be holding hopefully a lot of art workshops, all different types of mediums, everything like that. Just a place that just really celebrates art, because there just isn't enough art spaces just to hold creativity or anything like that, or really encourage and support the arts, even value them really in society. So we just wanted to make a space for that. And that's also going to include like really the liberal arts as well, because we're going to be doing like poetry nights. I'm going to be like facilitating philosophy classes. It's probably going to branch into many, many different things.
It's very much a space where, obviously being a gallery, having paintings, having photos, etc., like that, hanging up on the walls, working very much as a traditional gallery sort of thing, but not, as the snob sort of galleries that you see around the place. That it's just.
Yeah, we're definitely not just going to be keeping like one style and just catering to contemporary art. Definitely not like that. So if you're someone that just wants to get away from that shit, I would recommend definitely checking out our gallery.
And then having these workshop spaces where somebody like me can teach painting workshops, and then somebody can come in like Avalon and teach philosophy workshops or poetry workshops, etc., having a book launches there and live music, stuff like that. It's really much a space for all sorts of creatives to come into and share their creativity and share their artworks and cultivate a space where isn't just put into this little box of contemporary art stuff. I need to make things that sell for the contemporary market, etc., but really a place where masterful creatives can come back and into fruition. Yeah,
definitely. What else did you want me to say on it?
No, I think that was great. I think that was everything you needed to say about that. But so how long till people can expect that opens up?
Well, we're just next week. We're just going to be starting. We're going to be in the shop and we're going to be doing all our renovations, and then so it's probably going to take about like 2 weeks, I'd say, to set up and do all the renovating.
Yeah.
You know, the work that we need to do. Obviously, we're still working on like websites and stuff like that. There's a lot to do. So hopefully, it will be, I'd say, between mid to late October. In between that time, I would expect definitely be up and running.
And there'll be an opening night, I'm sure.
Yeah, there'll definitely be an opening night where, you know, all like local creatives and artists and just the local community is really, of course, welcome to come and check it out, so you can see like what we have, you know, to offer. And if you're interested in either showcasing your art, doing workshops, whatever it is, you can just talk to us there. I
think that's going to be a really incredible space and really cultivate something different for the coast. And the coast doesn't really have something like that at all, really. There's 1 or 2 galleries around, but nothing with the ambition that Art Abyss has planned out for itself. But yeah, is there anything else you want to talk about coming up that you're working on? Want to let people know about? Or
I don't know. Are you trying to edge me towards talking about something?
I don't know. No, nothing. I think that was really good. I think that was a really good podcast. I think we covered a lot of ground on that stuff. We'd really love to hear people's feedback and their comments and what they thought about the stuff that we talked about here. And maybe we can touch on that.
Maybe suggestions of what else we can talk about.
Yeah, that'd be really great. We've got like a couple in the bag. We've
got a couple in mind, and I'm sure whatever way we could probably keep going with a lot of stuff to talk about. But it would be really cool to see what
beneficial.
People, what they would get, what value they would get, and what they want to see from us, and what questions they would like. Or
really want to open up the floor to everybody here to come in and maybe start discussion about whatever it is that. Hopefully stuff that me and Av can talk about related to poetry and painting, stuff like that. Of course.
Philosophy, other things.
Yeah. But yeah, please leave a comment down below if you're watching on YouTube. I'm going to try and put this on maybe Spotify or look at putting this on other podcast type of venues of that nature. And probably it'll definitely always be up on YouTube, so give it a like. Hit subscribe if you're not subscribed. Once you've done subscription, hit the bell so you get notifications every time I upload or we upload the podcast. Definitely going to be a weekly occurrence that we want to happen, like probably every Monday or so, or whatever day. If it's not Monday, it'll definitely be once a week, no matter what. But yeah, other than that,
I think that's everything.